Welcome back. Today we're actually going to cover modern taxonomy. This is a little bit of an addition to classification. So, how is taxonomy different than classification? Taxonomy is the science of classifying and organizing organisms based on characteristics, whereas classification, you're grouping things by similarity. Now, today, taxonomists organize evolutionary relationships based on physical and molecular evidence. We have the technology to actually study fossils that we found out in the environment. In addition, the use of DNA is helping us figure out the relationships between different types of organisms, whether they're closely related or we once thought they were closely related and now they're not because now we have more information. Much of modern taxonomy is based on the theory of evolution, which we're going to cover later on in the year. So the idea is that all organisms came from a common ancestor. They evolved, they changed over time to what they are now. Changes happen and the descendant organisms differ from the original ancestor. Again, this is not something you're going to see quickly. You may see it quickly in bacteria, but you're definitely not going to see it quickly in multicellular organisms such as us. Now, all of these differences that have happened over millions of years actually gave us biological diversity. This is where we have our finches, our birds, our plants, our grasses, everything living together in a specific environment. In addition, new species are discovered every single day. Like I mentioned in class, if you ever want to have a job where you can always still discover things and maybe put your last name on something like most scientists do, biology or science, a science field is for you. Some species go extinct. They're the unlucky ones. So like I was saying, we actually use evolution now a lot and we create these phylogenetic trees. You can think of it like the tree of life, or if you were to make a family tree for yourself, how would the information be organized? You come from a center trunk and it branches out into all these different branches because you're getting further and further from that common ancestor, which would be that tiny little black line on the bottom of your screen right there. Moving forward, we covered this in the reading. Modern taxonomy groups, we have domain, which is the largest and the broadest. Okay, we're going to dive into that and kingdom a little bit in this lecture. And we're not going to go into so much detail with phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. We know that binomial nomenclature created by Carl Linnaeus actually uses the genus and the species to make the scientific name. So like I said, we were going to focus on the three domains, which are archaea, prokarya, which include bacteria, and eukarya or eukaryotes or eukaryotics, which is us. So domain archaea, they're unicellular, meaning they're single-celled organisms. They're prokaryotic, meaning they have no cell nucleus or any membrane-bound organelles. So their organelles and their DNA are just kind of floating on the inside of them. A very important example that most of you would think were really cool are extremophiles. These are microbes or microorganisms that live in high temperature, high pressure, high salt concentration environments where most things would die or be dead or never exist. So a good example, underwater volcanoes, there are vents that come out and they're very rich in sulfur in the gas that comes out of these pores that are on the side of the underwater volcano. These bacteria would live right on the edge of those pores and have that extreme heat, extreme high percentage of sulfur, and that's what they thrive on. That's how they live. Domain bacteria are also unicellular, so they're single-celled. They're prokaryotic, which means they don't have any nuclear membranes or any membrane-bound organelles. They're autotrophic, which means that they can make their own food, or heterotrophic, which means they have to rely on other organisms for food. They're often pathogenic, which means that they can cause disease and cause harm, and they act as decomposers of dead organic material. We're actually going to jump into decomposers much later in the year, closer to the end of our curriculum. Some examples of bacteria that you may know are E. coli, anthrax, blue-green algae, and autotrophic bacteria, and nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which we will dive into that a little later on the year. They actually help most plants grow. The last domain is eukarya. This is kind of where we fit, and if you ever get confused, just think eukarya. That's where you came from. So eukaryotic organisms include animals, plants, fungi, protists. We're going to explore those a little bit in detail now. So the six kingdoms are archaebacteria, eubacteria, protists, fungi, plants, and animals. Now, archaea and eubacteria actually used to be classified together as monarans, but in the 1990s, scientists were finding that some microbes known as extremophiles living in extreme conditions such as high heat, high pressure, high salt concentrations were way too different from bacteria. So they were actually finally classified recently in the last 20 years into their own kingdom. Like I said, all new advancements and new discoveries all the time. Plants. So they're multicellular, meaning they're made of more than one cell. They're sessile, the new vocab word. Okay, so sessile means that they cannot move. They're stuck in the ground. They do not move like we are. They're autotrophs. They perform photosynthesis, so they make their own food. Their cell walls are composed of cellulose, which is actually a complex carbohydrate made of a bunch of sugar molecules bonded together. And additionally, they are sexually reproducing, most of them, meaning that they require pollen and a seed to create their next generation. They require two parents. Some examples are moss, ferns, plants with cones or flowers. We have animals, which are us. We're multicellular. We're motile, which means that we move. We're heterotrophs, which means we can't make our own food and we actually rely on other organisms for food sources. And then we are sexually reproducing with flagellated sperm and larger eggs. Now, even though I keep saying we, this is including penguins, this is including dogs, cats, your birds, anything that's an animal, anything that is multicellular, it moves, motile, heterotroph, it relies on other food. Additionally, there's fungi. They're unicellular, single-celled, or multicellular. Depends on what type of fungi you're looking at. They're heterotrophic. They are not plants. They actually rely on other organisms for food. They act as saprophytes slash decomposers. Now, saprophytes and decomposers are organisms that feed on dead materials by secreting enzymes, hydrolytic enzymes, and that would break down the organism, and then they would absorb all the broken down nutrients. Their cell walls are made out of chitin, which is a substance that is found in exoskeletons of insects, crustaceans, and arachnids. Arachnids are spiders, hate those things. They're asexual or sexual reproducing, depending on what type of fungi you're looking at. Some common fungi that you guys actually know are yeast, mold, mushrooms, edible and non-edible, athlete's foot, which I am sure you've seen a commercial for on the TV at one point or another, and they're very interesting. They're pretty cool. Now, the reason why I say they're pretty cool is because when we get into ecology and we talk about the food chain and how things need to get recycled, fungi, the decomposers or saprophytes, they're the ones who recycle the nutrients back into the environment. Our last kingdom are protists. Most of them are unicellular. They can be autotrophic, making their own food, or heterotrophic. They move with flagella, cilia, or pseudopods. Now, if you look on the left side of your screen, the flagella, they often kind of look like a mermaid's tail where they flap up and down and they kind of swim. But then you have cilia. You can think of these as like little hair-like projections that will go all over the side of the body. And if you guys ever watch those boat competitions during the Olympics where all the guys are pulling the oars at the same time, that's how cilia move. All of the hair-like projections will move in one direction and then they'll force themselves the other direction. It's kind of like you're swimming. Lastly, pseudopods right here. Pseudo meaning fake, pod meaning like foot-like projection. They actually shove their cytoplasm out of their body a little bit and reach and make this fake foot a little bit further and then kind of pull themselves towards that wherever that foot reached. Some examples are parameciums, amoeba, euglena, algae, seaweed, and slime molds. I do want to point out that before when I said blue-green algae, that is not a plant protist. That is actually a bacteria and a pretty dangerous one too. Most protists are actually asexual reproducing, and that means that they have one parent and they're basically like copies of one another. Even though they're a new generation, they're exactly the same genetic information, same everything. Hope you guys enjoyed this one and look forward to the next one.